On today's episode of the Regression to the Mean podcast, we have three quarterbacks that we are fading at cost in fantasy football drafts this year. I'm your host, Shaun, and I am joined by my co-hosts, my good friends, and fellow knowers of ball, Aidan Holler and Keegan Thompson. Boys, this week we've tiered the 2024 quarterbacks. We've also shared our priority flag plants. But are you guys ready to tell the Mean team who they shouldn't be drafting this summer? I know Keegan is. Keegan's a brave man.
They're going to be mean to me in the comments.
It's going to be a brave man. He's going to say the quiet part out loud today, and he's going to tell us why it's a mistake to draft CJ Stroud as the QB5 this summer.
I'll just get it out right now. If you're going to say something mean, that's fair. I understand. It seems ludicrous. Why would I fade CJ Stroud? But let's just start with the obvious stuff here. If I go back and look at last year, despite his awesome rookie season, on a points per game basis, he's quarterback 11. Players above CJ Stroud on a points per game basis: Kyler Murray, Brock Purdy, Justin Fields, Jordan Love, Kirk Cousins, even though 8 games, still more points per game, Dak Prescott. And then, of course, you have Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen. Not to mention, in 5 games, Joe Flacco is averaging 22 points a game in fantasy. But we won't really include Joe Flacco in this argument. People forget. So realistically, he's around QB10, QB11 fantasy points per game. And if you just look at fantasy points per drop back, right? What is the amount of fantasy points that they're earning every time they drop back? He's about 13 below people like Russell Wilson, again, Joe Flacco, Jake Browning, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott. Some similar names here for what I just mentioned. When I think of quarterbacks that I'm trying to draft, especially this high, I mean, he's the 6th quarterback going off the board right now. You're expecting him to average 20 points a game in fantasy.
Correction, fifth. He's the fifth.
Sorry, he's being drafted above Anthony Richardson, who led the league last year in fantasy points per dropback, despite only playing 2.5 games. But that's neither here nor there. I will ignore that when I draft him blindly a ton this year. But you're expecting him to match the production of people like Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes when you're drafting him that high. Kyler Murray is another name. I'm finding it very hard to justify his price tag. Does that mean I don't like CJ Stroud? Absolutely not. But when I think about some of the other quarterbacks I could have after him that might average the same amount of points per game, I'm talking about Dak Prescott. We're talking about Jordan Love. Brock Purdy is somebody I'd probably draft over CJ Stroud. He did get a shiny new toy in Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs. Like, their receiver corps has improved. They have a really good running back. Like, it is elite. That doesn't mean that that's going to turn into CJ Stroud production. Maybe Stephon Diggs has a very good year. Maybe Nico Collins. There's going to be a wide receiver that we're going to get upset about. But when I think of last year, 26 total touchdowns, 23 through the air, 3 on the ground. That's a lot of touchdowns. Maybe he gets a couple more and he reaches that 30 range. That's great, but maybe that doesn't come in the form of rushing touchdowns, which are valued a little bit higher than the 4-point passing touchdowns. You would need everything to go right for CJ Stroud. I mean, you are drafting him at his absolute peak right now. The only people being drafted above him are the elite of the elite in fantasy quarterbacks. And there are plenty of quarterbacks that I think valued below him that could match or exceed his fantasy output. You know, Jordan Love's one, Brock Purdy's another who I might be drafting over CJ Stroud just based off ADP. I really like the 2 top rookies in Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. There's people like Justin Herbert, who's getting really knocked down in ADP, who we highlighted in our flag plants via Shaun. It's a tough pill to swallow. Even in total fantasy points, these are some of the names that scored more total fantasy points, which I don't agree with looking on. But like, if you just, this is a matter of fact, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Tua, Sam Howell, Russell Wilson, and Trevor Lawrence all scored more total fantasy points than CJ Stroud last year. I know he was a rookie. I know his situation improved, but you are drafting him at his absolute peak production. I do not think there's any way, shape, or form he outscores Lamar, Jalen, or Josh Allen. He would need to throw 45 to 50 touchdowns to do that. He just doesn't have the rushing upside. It's a little expensive for my taste. I don't want people to kill me in the comments. I know it sounds crazy, but it's so expensive.
I mean, look at who's going around him. Like Trey McBride, Devonta Smith, Cooper Kupp, Mark Andrews, Joe Mixon, Malik Neighbors, Alvin Kamara. I mean, this is insane. Like, some of these guys I'd probably take over him, like Dalton Kincaid, but like, man, you're telling me you could take Trey McBride and then just go take Brock Purdy later, right? Like I'm doing that every time I can. Like it just feels like that's where the most positive EV situation is. Like if you look at his range of outcomes here, I mean it's good. Like Joe Burrow year 2 kind of seems like his potential in my opinion, where Burrow was amazing, threw a ton of touchdowns. He had Jamar Chase, finishes, I forget where he finished, but 22 fantasy points per game is where Burrow landed in his second year.
And that would be the best comp. I mean, obviously
Probably.
there's Justin Herbert way down there in the less likely comps, but when you look at the top 3 likely ones, you're looking at Baker, Andrew Luck, Marcus Mariota, which is Herbert, still, there's 2 that are 20 points per game, but even then, like Dak's the only like Konami code running back or quarterback from last year to average 20.5 points per game. And I think Dak will probably outperform CJ Stroud again this year. So it's a very rich price tag.
I mean, the guys who comp to him similarly in terms of like rush yards per game, which is I think my biggest hesitation with CJ Stroud is like, if this was 25 rush yards per game, like I just feel much better about his potential ceiling outcome. But there's just not a lot of guys who are rushing for less than 15 yards that are just crushing it. Like I guess Herbert is the comp. Like if you want to say his ceiling outcome here is 2021 year 2 Justin Herbert, after Justin Herbert sets the world on fire as a rookie, like that's probably the ceiling outcome for CJ Stroud.
And look at the amount of pass attempts per game too in that season for Herbert. I mean, that's 40 pass attempts per game. That's
crazy.
I mean,
yeah, that's crazy. And how many did he even have last year? He finished last season with 36 pass attempts per game. He's probably going to need to clear 40, right? Like
touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean 40 attempts per game.
Yeah, to get to that like elusive 35 plus touchdown mark, and like maybe a couple scrambles in the red zone that hit home for him. Like
he has
Stephon Diggs is going to help
rush without his rushing upside. Like there's no other way to put it. Like he's got to go for like 4,500 yards and like 40 touchdowns to hit at QB6 or higher.
And I don't even think the yardage is the hard part. Like you add Steph Diggs, like it's pretty easy to say, okay, he threw for 4,100 last year. Let's tack on another 400 yards. But it's the touchdowns. Only 23 last year in a very, very good rookie season. He had 39 rush attempts, 167 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. But like we have to bump those touchdown numbers up. But where do you project that? How does he get there? Like Shaun said, you got to add a couple extra pass attempts a game, but like that's not something that's in his control. That's fully based off the offensive scheme. Their running game is going to be better last year. Like who knows? He could throw less, even though he has better wide receivers. It's tricky, really, really tricky.
Yeah, I feel like he could come out and have a Herbert season. I think he could easily clear 20 fantasy points per game, but he has to do that if you draft him at QB5. I think he has to. And realistically, you want guys with upsides. So like you basically need this Joe Burrow season, and you need the Justin Herbert season. Like that's realistically what you need.
And those aren't common. They're not common. So
yeah, and you don't give yourself any runway. Like when you draft him that high, you just don't give yourself any wiggle room. Like you're basically saying like he's going to finish as the QB5 or better, which is it's really hard to do. I mean, if you just look at last year, like who's QB5 on the year at total points, and it's Jordan Love. And Jordan Love had a fantastic year. Brock Purdy's QB6. Patrick Mahomes is QB7. Like you're asking CJ Stroud to outscore the likes of Mahomes, Purdy, Love, Dak.
Jordan Love last year averaged 15 rushing yards per game, but he had more rushing touchdowns than CJ Stroud. So I don't know, man. It's hard. I feel like you don't want to fade somebody with as good of vibes as CJ Stroud, especially when they have the weapons that they have.
Immaculate
so it might just be the most mid-curve thing ever to be like, I don't know, CJ Stroud, passing volume, like doesn't rush.
Am I mid-curving CJ Stroud right now?
We might be mid-curving this because I feel like the dumbest and the smartest people are like CJ Stroud go Burr probably, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it's tough.
He might go Burr.
It's tough. It is. Before we move on to our next guy, 2 things. If you are part of the 70% of people who are watching this video that have not yet subscribed to the Regression to the Mean podcast, you know what to do. Like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on the notifications to make sure you aren't missing any of the content that we are dropping weekly. And 2, if you love fantasy football and you want to compete for a chance at $1.5 million, you need to be drafting on Underdog Fantasy this summer. If you download the Underdog app and sign up using promo code RTM, the good people over at Underdog will double your deposit up to $100. Drafting on Underdog is my personal favorite way to get prepped and ready for the fantasy season. CJ Stroud's going in the 70s over there because those guys are sharp. They don't want to take him at 50s, but it'll be a little bit different in home leagues. But promo code RTM, double your deposit. All right, moving on to the next guy here, somebody who has been comped pretty favorably in his career to CJ Stroud, and that is none other than the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, Mr. Dak Prescott. Aidan, why are you fading fantasy QB3 from last season?
This video is going to get a lot of comments.
350 fantasy points last season. Why are you at a cost for Dak Prescott this year?
Yeah, we are staying in the state of Texas, and we are fading Dak Prescott. And let me tell you why. You're probably thinking, Aidan, what are you doing? He just came off QB3, 4,500 yards, 35 touchdowns. Like, what's not to like? He's only hit both of those numbers once in his 7-year career prior to last year. Like, this isn't like Dak Prescott is doing this every year. This feels like more of an anomaly, personally. So, name of the game here. I think he's going to regress to the mean. I just see it coming down.
Wow, well played.
Whoa.
He said it. Ding, ding,
Whoa.
ding. The offense really isn't that good. You've got CD and Ferg, and outside of that, you got a bunch of nobodies, man. We got the ghost of Brandon Cook still running around, Jalen Tolbert, and a bunch of guys that aren't going to be on your fantasy rosters. The front office completely punted on running back against kind of everyone's surprise. And one of the biggest part, too, that I don't think people are talking about is the offensive line. In years prior, this has been like a top 5 unit pretty consistently. Just absolute beefy boys up there pushing people around. Not the case this year. Tyron Smith is gone, and we've now got a rookie left tackle protecting Dak's blind side. We've got a second-year center who has started 2 games in his NFL career. We've still got Zach Martin. You still got Tyler Smith there at left guard. But we're pretty much looking at it like a league average NFL line at this point. So I think those like really cozy pockets that Dak has been accustomed to in years prior is not going to be quite as clean this year. And he's just not a very mobile guy. Like earlier in his career, I think he had a bit more scoot, but before some of the injuries.
Scoot, good word there.
It's just not
he did
the
have
same
some scoot.
anymore. So
he had some scoot.
It just feels like Dak's going to have to do everything this year. And I don't like that. He's at QB9. Like, I'd rather just wait for a couple other guys. Like, just looking at a couple guys behind him. Like, you've got Jordan Love at 10. You've got Tua, Jared Goff at 13 and 14. You've got Caleb at 15, Justin Herbert at 17. Like, I just don't think I need him there at QB9. Like, we've said in episodes prior, like, I kind of want one of the guys in the top 6 or 7, or I'm going to just skip the next little tier and kind of just keep loading up flex players. So,
Man,
I think he's coming off a great year, but it just doesn't do it for me. It feels like he's just going to regress positively, and I don't like the vibes around him.
Wow.
Sean is so wrapped in the Sims. He's just like, wow, look at these comparisons.
He loves
Sean is legit in the Sim right now. He's
I'm
just
listening
like,
to Aidan.
oh
I'm like,
my
yeah,
God.
I'm out on Dak. And I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of 20s. Wow, that's a lot of 20s, man. Oh no. I just got Dak pilled mid
He just simmed himself into a Dak pill. That's crazy.
Literally my notes
Jay
here.
in there again.
My notes with
There's like
my
a list
notes
of
with-
25 players, and Aiden's just like, Jay Cutler.
Jay.
Oh my god.
We got a Dalton sighting.
Oh my goodness. So my notes for Dak were bad vibes with the offense of the team. The vibes are just weird. Like, he doesn't have a contract. It's potentially a contract year. Like, are the Cowboys going to implode? Like, they're talking about how Royce Freeman's their RB2 right now. Like, what is going on with that squad? Like, Tyron Smith's gone. Like, the weapons aren't good. Like, Aidan hammered a lot of that home. So I could see Dak coming back to earth a little bit, just with that whole entire offense coming back down to earth. But then at the same time, like, Mike McCarthy came in and was like, we're going to throw the shit out of the ball. And that's what they did over and over.
And they're probably
going
to throw the shit out of it again.
Again, they have Zeke's their running back. There's no way they're going to run the ball. Like, this team is telling you.
And the
that
wide
they're-
receiver, like,
I think
CD's
the
gonna go
line will still be
stupid.
top 10. I think the line's still supposed to be top 10. This is the only thing I'll say against Aidan. Like the line could be top 10. CD goes ballistic again. Brandon Cooks, Tolbert, like do whatever they need to do as a wide receiver 2-3 range. And Ferg like gets really busy this year. Is somebody I think is going to be an underrated tight end target. And like, yeah, is Zeke washed? Probably. Like, do they have a strong run game? Probably not. But that's all the more reason for
probably.
You like
not.
that?
You like just that? Bore at us? You just bore at us. Not.
All the more reason for Dak to throw the shit out of the ball, right? Like offensive environment will largely be the exact same as it was last year, minus Tully Pollard, who was very frustrating, but passing environment should be the exact same. And Dak is Dak, baby. Dak can throw the fucking
fragile.
rock.
It feels really fragile to me because like we're one CeeDee Lamb high ankle sprain away from this being like the levels of Jover is
a nightmare.
It's so Jover if something happens to CeeDee. Like this offense will fall apart. It feels thin. Like
that's true.
But
it's true.
If it breaks right, he's gonna have a really good year.
The only thing I'll say about Dak is if it breaks right, he still goes up a couple spots from where you're drafting him. Like I still think like where he's at, it's not quite his ceiling. I'm not saying there's much more than where he's being drafted at. So I understand a concern there from Aidan because, like, yeah, 8th, 9th quarterback off the board, he might just finish 7th, and that might be the top end of where he could finish. And that's not much improvement, right? Like, you want to take a swing on somebody who's going to get you a couple extra spots on where he was drafted from. But
fellas, I had it wrong. I was looking at his year comparisons from last year, his projections for next year. They're not 20s at least. Still pretty good. Still pretty good, but it's not like just 22, 20, 21. His biggest comp is 2019 Kirk Cousins. That's his biggest comp.
The sim
right now.
Fooled you there for a second. You trusted the sim.
Yeah, I should have trusted Aidan. Aidan is the computer. He is the computer. All right, moving on to our next guy here. I can't say his name. I really can't do it.
No, not again.
I can't do it. Tua Tagovailoa. There, I did it, right? Tagovailoa.
I think that's as close as you can get.
Tua Tunga.
In this N in the first syllable.
Tongue. Well, that they say tongue. Like there's a Tunga.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Tagovailoa.
No tongue. You're saying tongue.
No, but I've heard that,
tip
bro.
of the tongue. It's not Tua tongue. It's Tua Tagovailoa.
Tell us why you're fading. Oh, we'll call him Tua T.
Yeah, tell me why you're fading Tua Tungy.
I just call him Tua. Or
Tua
or
T.
One number one for the Dolphins. So this has nothing to do with anything against Tua. Like I really think Tua. Honestly, a lot of people are shitting on the contract extension. They're calling it a Jimmy G contract. I think Tua is way better than Jimmy G.
It's me. It's me. I'm people.
Yeah, I think people are like. This has everything to do with the fact that, like, on a point per game basis, last year Tua was the QB 18. He's being drafted as the QB 12. Like, I don't. It's a boring argument.
Yeah, what's the jump?
What's
the jump there? What's the reason for it?
Just on a point per drop back basis, he was the QB 16. Like, I have nothing against Tua. I'm happy he got paid, but this feels mispriced. Like, the path to Tua being a top 12 fantasy QB is through passing TDs. And I think he can improve there, considering that I don't think Raheem Mostert scores 18 rushing touchdowns. I think this team's going to be balanced, and I think Devon Achane is going to emerge. Like, I think Devon Achane is going to be a superstar this season, and if that happens, maybe it happens as a pass catcher, but I think it's going to happen as him as a rusher. So I think they're going to run the ball a ton this year. Like, that's my base case with the Dolphins, and like I think he's a great option to pair with one of the rookies. Like, if you take Caleb Williams, snag Tua. Like, him and Jared Goff are very similar. But again, for him to be elite, he needs to throw 35 to 40 touchdowns for him to not only hit at ADP, but also like to really expand upon it, to like be a league winner type for you. This just feels like a really safe pick. And I just think he's mispriced. Like, why is he going 4 spots ahead of Justin Herbert? Like, that doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. Like, if you see his comps here, his number one is Derek Carr, 16.5. You got Peyton Manning here at 25. That's great. But like, you see a lot of 17s, 19s, 16s. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I'd take Dak over Tua 9 times out of 10, right? Like, easy. No.
I'm not.
Whoa, that's called standing on business. Oh my goodness, you would take Tua over
that offense
Dak.
is going to be. He just led the NFL in passing yards. Like he was legit last year, and it's.
So you think
and what
passing touchdown regression?
What did it get him in fantasy?
You think passing touchdown regression?
Pretty damn good. That's ahead of what
cumulative.
He's right now.
It is good.
Cumulative QB9.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
He's safe to your point. Like, I don't see Tua as a league-winning QB. But like again, I'm kind of skipping the Dak to I'm skipping Dak, Jordan Love, and Brock. Like, I really just don't need any of them on my team. I don't think any of them are gonna outperform. And then at that point, if I'm gonna take the safe pick, I'd rather just go a little bit lower to Tua or Goff or Herbert. Personally, it's that range. I really just don't care for this year. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I get it. Again, we're splitting hairs here. Just draft one of the top 6 quarterbacks, and you'll print, or one of the rookies.
Totally, yeah. Just yeah.
I mean, Keegan, you're a Tua hater. Do you have any thoughts before we jump on Tua?
Yeah, I just think for having 2 of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL, you would expect maybe some more electric production out of your quarterback. I mean, he threw for, league leading passing yards last year, and he still only ends up as QB9. That might be his ceiling. I'll put on my strong ass hater cap right now for Tua, but it's fair. Dude, where else could he go from there? I mean, QB9 led the league in passing. Yeah. Sure, more touchdowns, but the only touchdowns he's going to get in that type of offense are Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, breaking home. Part of the whole structure that they're built off from an offense perspective is a timing and rhythm-based offense that requires a lot of open field separation from 2 of the fastest guys in the NFL. I mean, Mike White even said it. This week after a training camp practice, he said the way that Tua leads their wide receivers into space and the way that he's able to orchestrate the offense based off timing and rhythm is everything, and that's why it makes them successful. But he's basically telling you what their offense is. Do you know how hard it is to set up that type of offensive game plan in the red zone? I don't think Tua is a very effective red zone quarterback, which is why they lean on the run game. Mike McDaniel gets creative, where Mostert, Devon Achane are going to get a heavy dose of touches from 15 yards and in. So Tua is going to have to throw 50-yard touchdowns, or Tyreek's going to have to break for a touchdown, to increase that number. I don't all of a sudden see him being this elite red zone guy out of nowhere. So where does that extra touchdown production come from? He might lead the league in passing yards, but is that going to get you more than QB9? I'm not very sure.
We need the TDs.
That was a long-winded way, but
we need the TDs. He threw 14 picks last year too. So
he's just boring. It's kind of the best way. He's just kind of boring. Fantasy football should be fun, you should be go for gold, man. Tua's probably not going for gold. I'm curious how many fantasy rosters started Tua in week 17.
He's a good emergency plan quarterback, but he's being drafted as a top 12 guy. I'm out at that ADP. Simple as that.
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
Simple. And for that reason, I'm out.
Sorry, Sharks.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, boys. We talked a lot of quarterbacks this week. It's been fun. It's been a good time. We're going to be talking running backs next week, so giddy up. We'll have some probably mock drafts coming out too in the time being. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Before we jump, Keegan, anything you got to say to the listeners?
If you have a partner or a romantic relationship, it's time to do everything you can to show them that you care. Football is upon us. It's time to give your life to fantasy
5 weeks.
football.
5 weeks.
You have 5 weeks to make the most of your relationship. Go on as many dates as you like. Buy as many flowers as you like. Yeah.
Put the ring on it.
Yep. Everyone. You might need to. It's going to be rough, but we're going to make it through. We're going to win
fuck in.
We're going to win some titles, and we're not going to get divorced this year. That's the plan. That's the plan.
No divorces.
All right, boys. Thank you for joining, and till next time.